So you think you know UFOs? The Buga Sphere, discovered in March 2025 by onlookers in the area. They noticed it flying along the tree lines and outside of the city, witnessed by a few different people in the area. One gentleman witnessed it get shocked by the lines and fall to the ground. Later on, scientists were able to study the object and see that it wasn't just a ball of steel. This ball of steel had erratic things happen to and around it with equipment, electronics, and the history behind this is yet to be fully understood. Of course, Carl Sagan and a few other scientists within the time period of the Bet Sphere and other spheres and other experimental equipment that may or may not have been controversially known at the time put this at the forefront, and all videos that are known to this day of the Buga Sphere and the other spheres like the Bet Sphere and any other experimental technology that may or may not be publicly announced could maybe be a danger to national security. So the Buga Sphere is being studied by top researchers after being discovered in Colombia. At this time, the Buga Sphere sits in the possession of scientists and official officers under the guidance of the handlers of the current Buga Sphere. At this time, the Buga Sphere has been studied by many individuals. The sphere was first seen in 2025 hovering in the skies over Buga, Colombia, moving in an unusual ring zigzag pattern that did not match the behavior of any known objects or aircraft. And then it quickly fell to the ground after being electrocuted. Since then, there have been mysterious theories about it, and the sphere has been under study by researchers at Mexico's prestigious National Autonomous University, UNAM, and their findings are as strange as the object itself. It also named after the Colombian town where it was discovered. Why is the Buga Sphere such a big deal? As described by Dr. Carlos Munoz and engineer Rodolfo during a UNAM hosted press conference, the organization was hosted to take microscopic scans that revealed complex fiber optics like wiring inside the object, indicating that it could be instruments that could receive or even give signals. Bizarrely, this contains central nucleus, which they call a chip, and surrounded by 18 microspheres and 3 layers of metal-like material. On the outside of the sphere, there are Sanskrit hieroglyphic writings that one would say indicates very, very hidden knowledge. Once discovered, the object once originally weighed 2 pounds and then quickly advanced to over 10 pounds in weight, advancing that the object was not the same object that when they first found it. Now, other observations and sightings of these spheres have been seen before and witnessed within the realms of our skies. On the exterior of this object, the scientists have taken carbon-dated samples, which actually registered the Buga Sphere being over 12,560 years old. And with the markings indicated on it, the Sanskrit, which is pretty much known for over the last 4,000 years as the oldest known language ever known to mankind. And the Buga Sphere is totally covered in it. Now, the object in question in the areas of Colombia were giving signals of extraterrestrial signs and indicating through crop circles in the area that this sphere might be connected to not just human science and the geological study of the entire planet's chemistry, but the advanced knowledge of what computer chips, frequencies, and higher learning from ancient secret knowledges might be able to tell us. These frequencies and this chip looking etched into the front of the Buga Sphere is basically just part of the story. Originally, a sphere called the Bet Sphere crashed real close to a family's house as they realized the explosion in the area. they were able to realize that it wasn't too far out from where they were at. They were able to take possession of this sphere that was similar to the Buga Sphere. It displayed other characteristics similar to the Buga Sphere, but the family indicated that it would follow them around the house, the Bet Sphere. The family indicated that they were pretty much an ordinary business-oriented family with a trucking company that pretty much ran the house. And having such a sensational piece of technology there around the family's house, the family, who had a very nice museum-looking type mansion, was scrutinized by the Navy that they had all had an odd ball of steel, but they indicated that it was displaying certain features and qualities that weren't exactly normal, like following them around the house or being able to balance itself on the edge of a table and then move back the opposite direction. Originally, at the original origin of where they found it, there was a fire, sense of explosion, but this is the only object they found in the area. The family was very curious, and of course they sought help. So x-rays were taken of the Buga Sphere, just like the Bet Sphere, and that they were indicating that inside the materials were not just of aluminum, but other trace minerals that were very rare and not really used in modern day machinery or any type of industrial processes. The local radio hosts took a great fascination to the Bet Sphere and were able to put it on the main stage, where in this time some of the biggest players in the UFO game who worked with Project Blue Book were able to take a look at the Bet Sphere and analyze it, and even spend a night with the family in a bedroom with the sphere all night after hearing reports that it was flying around. And then after electrocuted, the family was able to then bring it in their possession and bring it home with them. After these high-profile investigations from some of the government's leading authorities, the family was still left questionless. This is similar to some of the objects were found overseas and also in Afghanistan in recent modern times, that we've seen spheres flying around. This will not be the only indication that we've seen spheres around the world and mysterious objects that were found in the beaches of Japan that even disappeared weeks after their origins. These are indications that we live in a time where technology, history, and the future are all coming as one. Technology is doing their best to analyze all three spheres and any other spheres that are found, but the Buga Sphere seems to display the most interest with Sanskrit that was studied by the local university and given authority that they can actually make out part of what is written on the Buga Sphere. Just like the Roswell report, similar back to the incidences reported in the 40s, the Roswell incident, which is nearly 78 years old, displayed similar type hieroglyphics as well as this Sanskrit type writing. The RFA captures flying saucer on a ranch in Roswell region. The authorities that were in control of that day, Colonel Blanche and other generals were able to fabricate a few items found from the field and do an interview for the local newspaper to show that this was just a bunch of debris, aka called a weather balloon. Now, lots of testing's been done over time, from the World War I's all the way to modern day, showing that governments do experimental programs, and that the Russian and U.S. at that same exact time at a technological race, and the bounds of the leaps of the nuclear race would extremely encourage both of them to be doing exotic technologies for the expansion of both countries and their governments and their political power over the entire world. Now, many questions arise of technological equipment and industry specialists testing experimental aircraft at that time in the areas that some would say that the Buga Sphere or even the Bet Sphere were just some type of experimental equipment found, that the airports and pilots in the areas that witnessed incidences similar to the crash in that time area and flying objects in the sky may have just been false reports of balloons being tested in the areas in which the government, of course, give very little information. Regardless of this, the newspaper article displayed very weathered material similar to tinfoil, or what we would call an elaborate material that is able to conduct and maintain its structure and reshape itself even after crinkled and dented. Colonel Blanchet, aka Butch, was then promoted, of course, to general at a later date, was able to give first opinions of his experiences that day. And of course, the U.S. Army shook it off as something as just an experimental weather program. Nothing other than that. Nothing to see here, folks. Of course, the newspaper displayed the RAF captured a flying saucer and then, of course, retracted their statements and then immediately put out the report about the weather balloon soon after. Roswell was then on the forefront, and of course, locals were in disbelief of what they witnessed first. The debunk of the Roswell flying disc world simmers with excitement. Officers say the discs were weather balloons. Who knows what top secret information was withheld that day from all authorities? The president at that time was Truman, and he knew more than aware of not just national security issues or nuclear threats or experimental equipment in the field, but he also had his own experiences and very little to say. The world sees that the experiments done behind their backs, funded by the governments and the Black Book projects like the balloon programs that we've seen in most recent times, and that the Chinese and other countries that are weather balloons are experimenting through our skies all through the world and witnessed by pilots and people from the seas. Also, there's other experimental equipment that's been tested not just by other countries, but our own country with specialized equipment for both surveillance, weather monitoring, and of course, the ability to send information back to HQ. Specialized equipment both in the U.S. and other countries have been used in special circumstances to monitor a multitude of things. Other countries find this as a weaponized product. At the UFO Museum, there is plenty to see with historical facts of the weather balloons related to the Roswell incident and the metallic objects, not just that, but the hieroglyphics and the Sanskrit found on a specific metal object that day other than the metal fragments that were found like sheets of paper. This is indications that something that day was flying and fell from the sky. Could it be a weather balloon? Could it be an experimental high-tech equipment for the arsenals of nuclear arms race? The Roswell experiment conducted, we'll never know. The Army only told us what they want us to know. And of course, that day, all living relatives in modern day of the people that were part of this event have other things to say of what their family members once said. The family member of the original gentleman who sits here in this picture here said that he witnessed 3 different aliens, 2 dead and 1 sad that the others were deceased. Who knows what the real truth is of these aliens? Did they really see something outworldly that day? Was it experimental, or for the UFO purposes, the interviews that were done early in those days, and the earliest by most reporters would indicate the same conclusions, that Roswell was on the forefront of something very spectacular and something very big, and the U.S. Army, let alone the Air Force, and those regions of the United States were hiding something very serious at the UFO crash site, that there was a South Bomb Group in a missile range where they launched one of the first UFOs ever from a nuclear facility, or so they think. Other individuals that day that were a part of this, like Major Jesse Marcel, intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group at Roswell, New Mexico, his family indicated that he witnessed something there that day. But of course, in his own personal career, he would have never spoke up during that time. Or Colonel William Blanchet, a.k.a. Butch, commander of the 509th Group, who set and staged up the photos that day for the publicity stunt to be able to show off the weather balloon materials that was just pushed off as a hoax and not any flying discs. No matter what, that day, they were able to find, within the degree of materials found from a supposed weather balloon, something that displayed some form of hieroglyphics as well as Sanskrit written on it that day. It looked like such. But the military would not disclose full information of this incident, nor would they release any type of top secret intellectual information other than the witness statements of those that were there for the event. Everything else, of course, secretly was displayed on July 8th, 1947, as the Army wanted us to see it. But if you look in this photo right here, it would indicate that there might have been a letter right there written by J. Edgar Hoover himself related to this incident. Other reports looked at Temple, a.k.a. a code word for the president's head staff, governed by the Federal Bureau of Investigations, headed by J. Edgar Hoover himself, would not release any information about this. But the oldest language of ancient India, Sanskrit, known by 102 Arab languages, that the flying discs are not just a result of any army experiment, but we must insist on full access to the disc recovered and all information regarding to it. The Sanskrit that was found on the Roswell incident, as well as the Buga Sphere that's written on it and confirmed by scientists, shows that the basis of all languages started from Sanskrit that originates in both India and over Arabic all the way from Phoenician times. At this moment, it is very much unknown of the origins of the original Sanskrit, that we only have written accounts and versions that only last from the last 4,000 years. But one thing we do know, that almost all languages came from, and derived themselves from Sanskrit. From ancient Greek to Arabic, the Phoenician language was the closest to the original Sanskrit of its time. At this moment, the oldest form of Sanskrit we have is the Rig Veda, which is really just a form of Indian-type hymns and religious-related information and songs within written text. The Indians did their best to historically preserve the ability of the knowledge of the ancients and the cultures and the religions and everybody that played their part within the roles of the ancient histories. We may never know from the Greek philosophers or the ancient texts that were left in multiple different languages from different cultures from around the entire world, but we do know one thing: Sanskrit, Greek, and all known formed knowledges of any written language all came from these exact regions. At this time, this is the oldest known form of language to people ever created by mankind. And ranging from 1500 BC to 2020 CE present, we have a stretch of nearly 4,000 plus years of where Sanskrit was once prevailed as the ultimate language and writing for all known faces of the earth, in which all languages derived from it, from ancient Greeks to the oldest languages ever known. They all have an original basis from the Sanskrit. That if you look here within the original text, that most languages that derive from one language derive from the other language, derive from this original Phoenician of Sanskrit, and then it goes all the way back to the original basis of the original kings and queens and all those who generated literature and writing for their people during a time of better or worse. Nearly 4,000 years ago, they were able to use the form of communication to better themselves through the society of history and what their people did in that time for better or worse. We may never know what the descendants from an unknown script may have for us, but we do know after collective of multiple knowledges from different events and other parts of the world, all in time, we will be able to put it all together to bring our languages and our knowledges from over 3,000 years ago to this current time and be able to understand the mysteries of the objects and the Sanskrits on these particular objects that we've been able to obtain through modern day observation, experimentation, and of course just pure luck. We may not know exactly 100% of what this object does. What you know about rolling down in the deep, 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 down in the down in the down in the down. What you know about down in the deep when your brain goes, you it's yeah, that's